We live in a time where a constant analysis of the unemployment rate is absolutely paramount in order to ensure a healthy economy. This presentation is thus going to look at a comparison of the current unemployment rate with the natural unemployment rate and the actions that the federal government should take with fiscal policy. Regarding the current unemployment rate, in October the unemployment rate fell to 5% from 5.1% in September. It's important to note that this is the lowest level of unemployment since April of 2008. Said Dan North, chief economist at Euler Hermes, quote, "The October jobs report is a virtual blockbuster." In October, the economy generated 271,000 jobs, with all but 3,000 of them coming from the private sector. It's important to note that this is the fastest growth rate this year. Illustrating the consequential expansion, white-collar businesses added 78,000 professional jobs, healthcare added 56,700, retailers added 44,000, restaurants added 42,000, and construction added 31,000. The only two industries negatively hurt were energy and manufacturing. So does this unemployment rate accurately represent the state of the labor market today? And the answer is yes. If you look at the graph, you can observe a trend of decreasing unemployment rates, thus showing how the current unemployment rate is indicative of the current state of the labor market. According to the St. Louis Fed, the natural rate of unemployment for the third quarter of 2015 is 5.06%. Thus, we can conclude that the natural rate of unemployment is greater than the actual rate of unemployment, meaning that real GDP is greater than potential GDP, and there is an inflationary gap. So just to reiterate, because the natural rate of unemployment is greater than the actual rate of unemployment, real GDP is greater than potential GDP, as denoted by the long-run aggregate supply. As a result, as indicated by the graph, there is an inflationary gap. So is the comparison between the natural rate of unemployment and the actual rate of unemployment revealing an inflationary gap actually indicative of what's going on in the economy? And the answer is yes. Illustrating this point, the Fed recently announced that there was an inflationary gap, and the Fed is actually considering increasing the federal funds rate through selling bonds to decrease the money supply and money demanded, decrease interest rates, and decrease investment and shift aggregate demand left to combat the inflationary gap. So to combat the inflationary gap, Congress should use fiscal policy, specifically contractionary discretionary fiscal policy. So as opposed to expansionary fiscal policy, contractionary fiscal policy involves decreased government expenditure, an increase in taxes, and/or a decrease in transfer payments. It's used to correct the inflationary problems of a business cycle expansion by shifting aggregate demand to the left. So which type of contractionary fiscal policy should we use? Well, in a time like ours, it's important to note that we should not decrease transfer payments and we should not increase taxes. The reason being that by doing either of those, we would debilitate the ability of many people to meet their basic needs because of the high cost of living in our country. As such, there's only one option left. Government expenditures should be decreased to shift aggregate demand to the left, to lower the price level, to decrease the real GDP, and to eliminate the inflationary gap. No doubt, in order to shift aggregate demand to the left, the government needs to decrease expenditures. Because the government expenditure multiplier, according to the Missouri Fed, is around 0.7 to 1, the government would only need to decrease real GDP by the amount that it exceeds potential GDP to mitigate the inflationary gap. So of the $3.5 trillion budget of the federal government, what programs do we cut? Well, some propose that we cut defense spending. That would do the trick. That would decrease expenditure and shift aggregate demand left. We could also cut seemingly non-essential programs like the National Endowment for the Humanities. So in conclusion, because the natural rate of unemployment is greater than the actual rate of unemployment, real GDP is greater than potential GDP, and there's an inflationary gap. In order to mitigate this inflationary gap, contractionary fiscal policy needs to be undertaken.
Created using Powtoon.